Hi, everyone. I want to talk to you today about 3 ideas I took from the article called A Distributed Leadership Perspective for Critical Consciousness in Middle Grades. I want to tell you my 3 ideas that I took and then dive deeper into each one. Starting with the first idea, critical consciousness. The second idea is leadership and how it should be distributed and not left up to one person. And then the third idea is that schools collectively need to take action instead of just talking about it, actually doing it. So starting with the first idea, this idea, critical consciousness, is about developing awareness and injustice and inequality. In the article, it explains that school leaders need to reflect on their own biasness and recognize how inequalities do show up in schools, whether it's unequal discipline, unequal rules and procedures, maybe tracking systems, but realizing that every voice matters and everyone needs to have a voice in these issues. So there was an example given in the article, and it talks about how a superintendent funded a student research project to investigate their district's history of segregation and how it still affects their community today. So what they did is the students collected old newspaper articles. They interviewed former students and they created a short documentary, and I love that. This project allowed both the students and the adults to reflect, learn, and act on the issues that connect directly to their own school environment. I learned that critical consciousness isn't about just thinking differently. It's about being aware of the community change. And I think that's really important I believe all schools need to, reflect within themselves and then reflect within the school and make change when it comes to injustice and inequality. Let's dive deeper into the second idea. So the second idea is about how leadership is in a school system and how leadership doesn't need to be left up to one person, left up to one individual or a small group of people. It needs to be left up to the community, and it needs to be distributed is what I'm trying to say. So, for example, instead of one principal, like a principal, carrying all the responsibility to make a change, the article talks about and encourages how leadership needs to be distributed. This means that you need to include teachers, faculty, students, the community, and the families. And they can all share different perspectives to make a change in leadership. Because everyone brings a different perspective. Everyone brings a different idea to the table whenever it is discussed and talked about. It opens the idea for maybe someone is closed-minded, maybe someone doesn't understand something. And when they hear a perspective from a different person who is from a different background or culture, it helps them realize and open up their mind to how everyone has different views of things. So in the article, it gave an example of how a middle school might form a quality committee made up of students, teachers, parents, and staff members who meet to review school policies or plan inclusive events. So a teacher might lead a professional learning session about culturally responsive teaching, while students could organize a campaign to celebrate diversity during Heritage Month. This idea, when you share it about how leadership can be shared, can bring everyone together. And it doesn't just fall on one person is what I'm trying to say. It becomes a collective effort. And when it becomes a collective effort, everyone can be stronger and grow from that. And it can be more sustainable. And then finally, the third idea that I took from the article is that schools can build collective awareness when they take action. So the article gives several different examples of this, but one example is the One Book, One School project, where everyone reads a book written by someone from a marginalized group. They share this experience together. They come together and they discuss it, and they talk about the identity, the privilege, and the justice, both inside and outside the classroom. And and I just love that. I love that because books are so powerful. When you read, it opens up a world of other possibilities. And I love that when they read the book and they come together, it brings them closer together as well. So Going off of that, another example is creating a summer reading program that highlights diverse authors and encourages students to think about social issues through the stories. So leaders can help students respond to current events. For instance, after an incident, racial injustice in the community, a school might invite students to express their action through art, poetry, and organized discussions. I love that. I love that. I love when kids can come together and voice their opinions through art and poetry instead of trying to do it orally. Not that I'm saying orally is a bad thing, because some kids would love to speak about it. But for example, I went to the Perry Fair and we stopped at the Heritage Museum, me and my family did. And we looked at all the different artwork that was created from elementary kids, middle school, high school, college kids. It was beautiful. You were able to see some of the artwork. Some of it was oil paintings, watercolor. It was beautiful, and you could see the feelings and emotions coming off of that painting when we walked through it. It was sadness, it was happiness, it was anger. Some of it, these students and adults were able to tie in current events to the artwork, and they were able to express their voice through artwork. And I just absolutely love that. And it actually helped me open my eyes more to those situations. So that was wonderful to see. So going off of that, though, these actions turn awareness into meaningful engagement. Students and teachers aren't just learning about equity, they're living it and helping share a more inclusive school environment. So 2 ideas that I want to implement in my classroom is first, distributed leadership, and second, critical social analysis. Starting with the first idea, distributed leadership. I'd like to apply this in my classroom by giving students more of a voice and responsibility in class decisions. So, for example, I could get a small student committee to help plan class projects or choose reading materials that reflect diverse perspectives. This would allow students to see themselves as not just a student, but a leader. And it also would help build a stronger sense of community and ownership. It's really important for kids to have a voice and implement their ideas inside of a classroom instead of the leader, like the teacher, telling them what to do all the time. Another example that came to my mind when reading this article was, in the beginning of school, we had these social contracts, and they come from capturing kids' hearts. And one of the things that we did together as a class for each period, because I teach 4 class periods, is each period, each class, first, second, third, and fourth, got to write their own social contracts and sign their name on the contract. So, for example, when we got together, say, for example, for first block, I would ask them, how would you like to be treated by each other? And they would tell me, I want to be treated respectfully. I want to be treated kindly. I want to be able to be non-judgmental, and I want others to understand me, so be understanding. And what we would do is we would take each of those students' ideas and we would write them on a big old sheet of paper, and that was like our contract. And after everyone gave me their answer, like another question was, how do you want me to treat you? And how do you think I want to be treated as well? And it all came down to everyone wants to be treated respectfully. They want to be understood. They want to be treated fair, is a really big one. And after we got done, we put those words on a big piece of paper, and each student signed their name, and we stuck it up on a wall for everyone to see whenever they came in. And anytime there was a disagreement or something that might negatively impact one of them or each other or anyone in or outside the classroom, we would refer back to the contract. Everyone would say, do you remember this contract that you signed? And they would say, yes. Well, you remember how we as a class collectively came up with how we all want to be treated. And one of the big ones was we want to be treated fairly, equally. And that would remind them, like, oh yeah, I do want to be treated fairly. I want to be treated how someone would treat me and how I would treat others. And it changed the whole dynamic of school. And so I thought that was a really cool thing to do at the beginning, and it stays up all year long. The second idea is I would like to use critical social analysis by encouraging students to connect what they learn in the classroom and use it outside the classroom for real world issues. So for instance, during social studies or language arts, students can research local topics related to equity, like access to education and community history and representation in media, and they can present their ideas and findings to everyone else. This helps students think critically about society, and it empowers them to be the change and make a positive change. So both of these ideas promote reflection, collaboration, and action, which is exactly why and what the article talks about as it describes the foundation for building critical consciousness in schools. So after reading the article, A Distributed Learning Perspective of Critical Consciousness in Middle Grades, one idea that I would love to and am going to implement is in my lesson plan, specifically allowing students to have a voice. I want to design class discussions and projects to include more student leadership and critical reflection. So in the past, I was always the one, that would lead class discussions, and I would have it on my lesson plan, teacher-led discussion, teacher-led lesson. And I want to implement more of student-led discussions, student-led lessons, allow them to have the voice, because that is extremely important for students to, one, have their voice be heard. Two, it opens up the door for other students to see the perspective of that student. And three, it also helps them grow socially and emotionally. And that is huge, especially in middle grades when students are learning how to connect with each other socially and emotionally. So I want them to have a better understanding in the classroom. So after this article, I read that this approach can limit students' voices whenever it's always teacher-led. Instead, I want to shift more towards a more distributed leadership model. I want to allow students to have a shared responsibility for leading discussions, asking questions, connecting lessons to real-world issues that matter to them. So an example of that would be during a unit, when we talk about identity and community. What I could do is I could assign small groups to lead parts of discussions using guided readings that the students themselves created. They could collaborate together on many research projects that examine issues on fairness and inclusion in our school and the local area. What this change would do is it would encourage students to practice their social critical analysis, one of the key elements from the article, by thinking about how broader social issues connect to their daily experiences. Because to me, I believe that this adjustment would benefit all my students, not just one class period, not just one student, not just a small group of students. It would benefit all students. And the reason why is because it promotes engagement, it promotes empowerment, and it promotes understanding for each other. And they're allowed to think critically about it and have deeper conversations when they do talk with each other. So by doing this and allowing students to have a voice, they feel more valued and they feel more understood. And it creates equal opportunity for everyone across the board. This reading really made me rethink my lesson plan by showing me that leadership and equity doesn't always have to come from me alone as the teacher. It creates a space for students to lead and to ask questions and to take action. And I can help them develop the critical consciousness that was described in the article. And it also helps them prepare for future, for in the future when they do continue to grow. It helps them to be more thoughtful, and it helps them to be more socially aware, and it helps them to be problem solvers, both inside the classroom and outside the classroom.